The diplomatic chamber aboard the massive station orbiting Kepler 442b hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology. Ambassador Elena Vasquez adjusted her formal uniform one last time before stepping through the airlock. After 3 years of careful negotiations, today would mark humanity's first official entry into the Galactic Confederation. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate dozens of different species. Atmospheric zones shifted seamlessly from one section to another, gravity fields adjusted automatically, and translation matrices ensured perfect communication between beings who had evolved on worlds light years apart. Elena had studied the protocols extensively, but seeing it in person still took her breath away. At the center of the vast space stood the Council of First Contact, representatives from the 12 founding species of the Confederation. The Altarians, tall and graceful with their crystalline skin that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. The Vorthak, resembling massive bears but with 6 arms and intelligence that rivaled the greatest human minds. The aquatic Nereids, floating in their specialized environment suits filled with the methane-rich atmosphere of their homeworld. Elena approached the designated speaking platform, her footsteps echoing despite the chamber's acoustic dampening. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ focused on her. She had practiced this moment countless times, but the weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. Honored members of the Galactic Confederation, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. I come before you today not just as a representative of the human species, but as a voice for a people who have dreamed of this moment since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. The Altarian Prime Speaker, Zeth Kaler, stepped forward. Their crystalline features remained impassive, but Elena had learned enough about their species to recognize the slight color shift that indicated interest. Human Ambassador Elena Vasquez, you stand before the Council of First Contact seeking admission to our Confederation. This is a momentous step for any species. Are your people prepared for the responsibilities that come with galactic citizenship? Elena nodded solemnly. We are, Prime Speaker. Humanity understands that joining the Confederation means more than gaining access to your technologies and trade routes. We understand that it means becoming part of something greater than ourselves, sharing in both the benefits and the burdens of galactic civilization. The Vorthak representative, General Krullex, leaned forward on his powerful arms. His species valued directness above all else. Your species is young, human. You have achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. You have not faced the trials that forge true galactic citizens. What can humanity offer the Confederation that we do not already possess? It was the question Elena had been expecting, the one that kept her awake during the long journey to this station. Humanity was indeed young compared to the other species. The Altarians had been sailing between stars for over 50,000 years. The Vorthak had built their first galactic empire when humans were still learning to control fire. What could Earth possibly offer to such ancient and advanced civilizations? General Krullex, you ask what humanity can offer, Elena replied, her voice gaining strength. We offer our perspective as a young species still filled with wonder at the universe. We offer our adaptability, proven by our survival, and growth on a world that has tested us through ice ages, asteroid impacts, and countless other challenges. But, most importantly, we offer something that I believe the Confederation has perhaps forgotten in its long history. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. We offer gratitude. True, deep, lasting gratitude for those who help us along the way. A ripple of movement went through the chamber. The translator matrices struggled for a moment to convey the full meaning of the human concept. Several species began conversing in low tones among themselves. The Nereid representative, floating serenely in their environmental suit, spoke for the first time. Their voice came through the translator as a melodious harmonic that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. Explain this concept, human. In our experience, gratitude is a fleeting emotion, soon forgotten when circumstances change. Elena had anticipated this response as well. In her studies of galactic politics, she had noticed a pattern. Alliances formed and dissolved based purely on mutual benefit. Trust was a commodity to be traded. Loyalty lasted only as long as it served both parties. It was efficient, logical, and utterly cold. With respect, honored Nereid, that is not how humans understand gratitude. When someone helps us, truly helps us in a time of need, we remember. We remember not just the aid itself, but the kindness behind it. We remember our debts, and we repay them, sometimes generations later. We remember our friends, and we stand by them even when it is difficult or inconvenient to do so. The chamber fell silent. Elena could feel the weight of their attention, their skepticism. These were ancient species who had seen empires rise and fall, who had witnessed countless promises broken and alliances shattered. To them, her words must sound like naive idealism. But Elena pressed on. I know this sounds like empty rhetoric to beings who have seen millennia of galactic politics. But I ask you to consider the history you surely have in your databases. Look at humanity's record, even in our short time among the stars. When the mining colony on Titan was threatened by solar flares, who stayed to help evacuate even when their own ships were at risk? When the research station in the Alpha Centauri system lost life support, who diverted their supply ships even though it meant delays to their own missions? She could see some of the representatives accessing their data systems, calling up records of these incidents. Elena had chosen her examples carefully. They were small events in the grand scheme of galactic affairs, barely worth noting in official histories. But they were the kind of moments that revealed character. These were not significant events to the Confederation, Elena continued. The beings we helped were not powerful allies who could advance our cause. They were simply people in need, and we helped them because that is what humans do. We help, and we remember being helped, and we never forget either. Prime Speaker Zethkaler's crystalline features shifted through a spectrum of colors Elena had never seen before. This is unusual. In our experience, species act according to calculated self-interest. To do otherwise is inefficient, even dangerous. Perhaps, Elena agreed. But it is who we are. And I would argue that it is not as inefficient as it might seem. Trust, real trust, is one of the most valuable commodities in the universe. It cannot be bought or manufactured. It must be earned through consistent action over time. Humanity offers the Confederation the possibility of true allies, not just convenient partners. General Krullex growled, a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful rumbling. Words are easy, human. Promises are easily broken. How do we know your species will remain as you describe once you taste the power that comes with Confederation membership? Elena smiled, and she saw several representatives react to the expression. Many species had emotional displays, but the human smile was apparently unique in its complexity, conveying warmth, confidence, and just a hint of mystery all at once. Because, General, we remember everything. Every kindness, every betrayal, every moment when someone chose to help or chose to harm. It is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We cannot forget the good any more than we can forget the evil. And, right now, standing before this council, we are filled with gratitude for the very opportunity to speak, for the chance to join something greater than ourselves. That gratitude will shape our actions for generations to come. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of different languages and communication methods as the representatives conferred among themselves. Elena stood quietly, letting them process what she had said. She knew that what she was proposing challenged fundamental assumptions about how galactic civilization operated. Finally, Prime Speaker Zethkaler called for order. Their crystalline form had settled into a deep blue hue that Elena had learned indicated deep contemplation. Ambassador Vasquez, your words are intriguing. The Council must deliberate on humanity's application. But, tell us, what would you see as humanity's role in the Confederation? We seek to be contributors, not just beneficiaries, Elena replied without hesitation. We want to learn from your wisdom and experience, but we also want to help solve the challenges facing galactic civilization. We want to be the species others can count on, the ones who remember their debts and honor their commitments. We want to prove that gratitude is not a weakness, but a strength that can bind the galaxy together more surely than any contract or treaty. The Nereid representative floated closer, Their harmonic voice taking on what Elena had learned was a tone of curiosity. And if circumstances change, if helping old allies becomes costly or dangerous, if your gratitude conflicts with your interests, Elena's expression grew serious. Then, we help anyway. That is what gratitude means to humans. It is not conditional on convenience. When someone stands by us in our darkest hour, we remember. And when their darkest hour comes, we stand by them, regardless of the cost. The chamber fell silent again. Elena could feel the weight of centuries of cynicism pressing against her words. But she could also sense something else, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or curiosity about what galactic civilization might become if her vision were real. The Council will deliberate, Prime Speaker Zethkaler announced. You will have our decision within one standard galactic day. Elena bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that her studies had indicated would be understood by most species present. Thank you for this opportunity, honored representatives. Whatever your decision, humanity will remember this moment and the dignity with which you have treated us. As she left the chamber, Elena caught sight of something that gave her hope. Several of the representatives were still talking animatedly among themselves, and she could see data streams flowing between their systems. They were not just going through the motions of deliberation. They were genuinely considering what she had said. That evening, alone in her quarters aboard the human delegation ship, Elena stood before the observation port looking out at the star field beyond. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, home to 8 billion humans who were counting on her to open the door to the galaxy. She had done everything she could. Now she could only wait and hope that her message had been understood. Her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission. The holographic display showed Captain Sarah Chun, the leader of the human delegation and Elena's closest friend since their days at the Diplomatic Academy. How do you think it went? Sarah asked without preamble. Elena considered the question carefully. I think I surprised them. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. Your speech about gratitude was powerful. But do you really think they'll buy it? These are species that have been playing galactic politics for millennia. To them, we must look like children making grand promises we can't keep. Maybe, Elena admitted. But we are who we are, Sarah. We can't pretend to be something else just to gain admission to their club. If they don't want us as we are, then maybe we're not ready for membership anyway. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. Do you really believe what you said in there? About humans always honoring their debts and standing by their allies. Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about human history, the wars, the betrayals, the broken promises. But she also thought about the other side of that history, the sacrifices made for strangers, the aid given freely to former enemies, the long memories of kindness that shaped human culture. I believe in who we can be, she finally said. I believe in the humans who stayed behind to help evacuate Titan Station even when they could have saved themselves. I believe in the crews who gave up their own supplies to save the Alpha Centauri researchers. I believe in the billions of people on Earth who have been dreaming of this moment not for what they can get, but for what they can give. Sarah smiled. Then, let's hope the Confederation believes in us too. The next morning, Elena returned to the diplomatic chamber to receive the Council's decision. The atmosphere felt different somehow, more charged, more electric. The representatives seemed more alert, more focused than they had the day before. Prime Speaker Zethkaler stood at the center of the chamber, their crystalline forms cycling through colors Elena had never seen before. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's application for Confederation membership. Elena's heart pounded, but she kept her expression composed. I am ready to hear your decision, Prime Speaker. Your words yesterday challenged many of our assumptions about how galactic civilization operates. The concept of gratitude as you described it, lasting, unconditional, transformative, is one we had not fully considered. We have spent the night reviewing your species' brief history among the stars, and we find evidence that supports your claims. Elena held her breath. However, Zethkaler continued, words and small actions are not sufficient proof of what a species will do when faced with truly difficult choices. The Council has decided to grant humanity provisional membership in the Confederation, contingent upon demonstration of the principles you have described. Elena felt a mixture of elation and apprehension. Provisional membership was better than rejection, but it meant humanity was on trial. What demonstration would be required? Prime Speaker General Krullex stepped forward, his massive form imposing even in the chamber designed for multiple species. The Confederation faces challenges, human. There are regions of space where old conflicts still burn, where species that have rejected our offers of membership continue to threaten peaceful worlds. If humanity truly believes in standing by allies regardless of cost, then you will have opportunities to prove it. The Nereid representative added their harmonic voice to the discussion. We propose that humanity be assigned as protectors to the border systems of the Althean sector. It is not a prestigious assignment, and the species there are not powerful or wealthy. But they are members of our confederation, and they deserve protection from the raiders and pirates that threaten them. Elena understood immediately. This was not just a test, it was a statement. The Council was giving humanity the chance to prove their claims about gratitude and loyalty, but they were doing it in a way that offered no glory or profit. The border systems were backwater worlds, barely worth defending from a strategic standpoint. If humans were truly motivated by gratitude and duty rather than self-interest, this assignment would reveal it. Humanity accepts this assignment with honor, Elena said firmly. We will protect the border systems as if they were our own worlds, and we will stand by our new allies regardless of the challenges we face. Prime Speaker Zethkaler's crystalline form shifted to a warm golden hue. Then, welcome to the Confederation, humanity. May your journey among the stars be long and prosperous. As the formal ceremonies continued and documents were signed, Elena felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Humanity had taken its first step into the galactic community, but that step came with enormous responsibilities. The species of the border systems were now counting on Earth's protection, and the entire Confederation would be watching to see if human promises meant anything. But as she looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, Elena felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not just for humanity's future, but for the future of galactic civilization itself. If her vision was correct, if gratitude and loyalty could truly transform the way species related to each other, then perhaps the galaxy was about to become a very different place. The first test of that vision was already waiting in the Althean sector, where humanity would either prove its worth or reveal itself as just another species making empty promises. Elena knew that the next few months would determine not just humanity's place in the Confederation, but the kind of species they would become among the stars. Commander Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, studying the tactical display that showed the Althean sector in all its chaotic complexity. 3 weeks had passed since humanity accepted guardianship of these border systems, and Marcus was beginning to understand why the assignment had been considered a test rather than an honor. The Althean sector contained 17 star systems, home to 8 different species that had joined the Confederation seeking protection from the constant raids that plagued this region of space. None of them were particularly powerful or wealthy. The Keth were skilled miners, but had no military tradition. The Solani were brilliant scientists, but pacifists by nature. The Torvan were accomplished engineers who built beautiful cities, but had never needed to defend them. What they all had in common was that they had been abandoned by their previous protectors when the costs became too high. The Vorthak had withdrawn their fleet after losing 3 ships to raider attacks. The Altarians had declared the sector too unstable for their commercial interests. One by one, the great powers of the Confederation had decided that protecting these worlds wasn't worth the expense. Now it was humanity's turn, and Marcus was determined not to repeat that pattern. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park from the communications station, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Solani Research Station orbiting Kepler 438c. They're reporting raiders in the system." Marcus turned to his tactical officer. "How far, Commander?" 18 hours at maximum burn, sir," replied Commander Zhang Wei. "But we've got patrol ships closer." The Hampton is only 4 hours out. Marcus considered the situation. The Hampton was a fast corvette, perfect for patrol work, but lightly armed and armored. The raiders attacking the Solani station would likely be better equipped and more experienced. Standard military doctrine would be to wait for the main fleet to arrive with overwhelming force. But the Solani weren't soldiers. They were researchers studying exotic matter in the system's asteroid belt. Every minute the raiders spent in their system was a minute of terror for civilians who had never seen combat. "Signal the Hampton," Marcus ordered. "Tell Captain Anderson to proceed to the Solani system immediately. We'll follow at best speed." Zhang raised an eyebrow. "Sir, the Hampton will be outnumbered and outgunned. Tactical analysis suggests a high probability of failure." "The Hampton isn't going there to win a battle, Commander," Marcus replied. "They're going there to let the Solani know they're not alone. Sometimes that's more important than victory." The bridge crew exchanged glances, but no one questioned the order. They had learned in their brief time in the sector that humanity's approach to protection was different from what their predecessors had offered. Previous protectors had focused on strategic value and acceptable losses. Humans seemed to focus on something else entirely. Marcus turned back to the tactical display, watching as the Hampton's icon began moving toward the Solani system. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Ambassador Vasquez before taking command of the sector fleet. She had been clear about their mission. This was about proving that human gratitude meant something, that their promises could be trusted. "Commander," Lieutenant Park called out again, "we're receiving a transmission from the Keth mining colony in the Tau Ceti system. They're requesting permission to suspend operations and evacuate their outer mining platforms. Long-range sensors are detecting unknown ships approaching their system." Marcus studied the display. Tau Ceti was on the opposite side of the sector from the Solani system. If raiders were hitting both systems simultaneously, it suggested a coordinated attack designed to stretch his forces thin. The previous protectors would have been forced to choose which system to defend, leaving the other to fend for itself. But Marcus had spent the last 3 weeks studying the sector's defenses, and he had made some changes that his predecessors hadn't considered. "Signal the Keth colony," he ordered. "Tell them to continue normal operations. The US Vigilant will be in their system within 6 hours." Commander Zhang consulted his display. "Sir, the Vigilant is a logistics ship. It's not equipped for combat operations." Marcus smiled. "No, but it's equipped with something better. Open a channel to Captain Liu." The main screen flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Captain Elena Liu, commander of the Vigilant. Behind her, Marcus could see the controlled chaos of a logistics vessel, crew members moving supplies, engineers maintaining equipment, the constant hum of activity that kept a fleet operational. "Captain Liu," Marcus said, "how many Keth maintenance specialists do you have aboard?" Liu's expression brightened with understanding. 47, sir. Plus a full complement of engineering equipment and defensive drones." "Perfect. Proceed to the Tau Ceti system immediately. Deploy your drones in a defensive perimeter around the mining platforms, and start training the Keth in basic defense protocols. Show them how to use their mining equipment as makeshift weapons if necessary." "Understood, sir." The Keth won't be defenseless when the raiders arrive. As the transmission ended, Marcus turned to find his senior staff staring at him with expressions of confusion and admiration. "Sir," Commander Zhang said carefully, "you're turning a logistics ship into a training vessel and arming miners with industrial equipment. That's highly irregular." Marcus nodded. The previous protectors thought in terms of military assets and strategic priorities. They saw systems to defend and acceptable losses to minimize. But we're not just protecting systems, we're protecting people. And people have capabilities that don't show up on tactical displays. Over the next several hours, reports began flowing in from across the sector. The raiders had indeed launched a coordinated assault, hitting 5 systems simultaneously in what was clearly intended to overwhelm any defensive response. It was the same tactic that had forced previous protectors to make impossible choices about who to save and who to sacrifice. But as Marcus monitored the situation from the Determinations Command Center, he began to see a different pattern emerging. In the Solani system, the Hampton had arrived to find 3 raider vessels preparing to board the research station. Captain Anderson didn't have the firepower to engage them directly, but he had something else, a crew trained in electronic warfare. Instead of fighting, the Hampton began broadcasting false sensor readings and communication intercepts that suggested a massive human fleet was approaching. The raiders, faced with what appeared to be an imminent arrival of overwhelming force, withdrew from the system rather than risk being trapped. In the Tau Ceti system, the Vigilant had arrived to find the Keth miners eager to defend their platforms. Captain Lu's crew had quickly shown them how to modify their mining lasers into makeshift weapons and how to use their industrial drones as automated sentries. When the raiders finally arrived, they found not helpless civilians, but determined defenders who knew their equipment better than any military force could. Similar stories were playing out across the sector. The human approach to defense was unlike anything the raiders had encountered. Instead of concentrating force at strategic points, humans were empowering the people they protected, turning every colony into a potential stronghold and every civilian into a potential defender. But it was the response from the protected species themselves that truly surprised Marcus. As word spread that humanity was not following the standard pattern of strategic withdrawal and acceptable losses, offers of help began pouring in from across the sector. The Torvin, master engineers, began retrofitting civilian vessels with defensive systems and sharing their architectural knowledge to help fortify vulnerable installations. The Solani, despite their pacifist nature, offered their advanced sensor technology to create an early warning network that could detect raiders long before they reached their targets. The Keth shared their mining expertise to help build hidden bunkers and supply caches on contested worlds. Most significantly, species that had been feuding for generations began working together for the first time. The ancient territorial dispute between the Keth and the Torvin was set aside when both species realized they could accomplish more together than apart. The Solani's scientific research, previously jealously guarded, was shared freely with anyone who could use it to improve sector defenses. Marcus watched this transformation with growing amazement. In 3 weeks, humanity had accomplished something that the Confederation's greatest diplomats had failed to achieve in decades. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple act of treating their charges as partners rather than burdens. The real test came when a massive raider fleet, frustrated by their inability to achieve easy victories, assembled for a coordinated assault on the sector's most valuable target, the Althean Central Station, a massive trading hub that served as the economic heart of the region. Marcus received the intelligence report while the Determination was still 2 days away from Althean Station. The raider fleet consisted of over 50 vessels, including several capital ships captured from previous victims. It was a force large enough to overwhelm any single human ship, and even the entire human fleet would be outnumbered 3-1. Previous protectors had faced similar situations by evacuating the station and withdrawing to more defensible positions. It was the logical choice, the militarily sound decision. It was also exactly what the raiders expected. Marcus stood before the holographic display in the Determination's briefing room, addressing the captains of his fleet via quantum communication link. The faces looking back at him represented humanity's best and brightest career officers who had volunteered for this assignment knowing it might be a one-way mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, we have a choice to make. We can follow established military doctrine and withdraw to protect our ships for future engagements. Or we can stand and fight, knowing that we're outnumbered and outgunned, because that's what we promised to do. Captain Anderson of the Hampton was the first to speak. Sir, if we withdraw, what happens to the civilians on Althean Station? They become refugees, Marcus replied honestly. The station will be destroyed or captured, and its population will be scattered across the galaxy. Some will find new homes. Others will not be so fortunate. Captain Lu leaned forward in her transmission. And if we fight? Marcus consulted the tactical projections. Computer models give us a 12% chance of victory. Even in the best-case scenarios, we'll take heavy casualties. The silence that followed was broken by Captain Maria Santos of the destroyer Invictus. Commander, with respect, I think you're missing something important in those calculations. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What's that, Captain? The calculations assume we'll be fighting alone. But we won't be, will we? As if summoned by her words, Marcus's communication officer announced incoming transmissions from across the sector. One by one, the faces of the species humanity had sworn to protect appeared on the briefing room displays. Gorvek, the Keth mining supervisor from Tau Ceti, was the first to speak. Commander Rivera, the Keth have 23 armed mining vessels ready for combat. We know you don't think of us as soldiers, but we've learned from your people that sometimes civilians must stand and fight. Next came Dr. Thissa of the Solani Research Network. Our stations cannot fight, but our sensor arrays can provide real-time intelligence on raider movements. You will not face them blind. The Torvan representative, Engineer Prime Velas, activated a holographic display showing dozens of ships. The Torvan Merchant Marine volunteers for combat duty. Our vessels are not warships, but they are well-built and crewed by those who remember what humanity has done for us. Marcus stared at the displays as more offers of assistance poured in from across the sector. In 3 weeks, humanity had not just defended these systems, they had inspired them. Species that had lived in fear for generations were volunteering to fight alongside their protectors. Commander Zhang leaned over to whisper in Marcus's ear, "Sir, if we accept their help and lose, we'll have led them to their deaths." Marcus nodded grimly. "And if we refuse their help and withdraw, we'll have proven that our promises were meaningless. Either way, we bear responsibility for the consequences." He turned back to the displays, looking at the faces of beings who had found courage they didn't know they possessed. "I won't lie to you. This will be dangerous, and some of us may not survive. But if you're willing to stand with us, we're honored to stand with you." The response was immediate and unanimous. Across 17 star systems, the species of the Althean sector began mobilizing for war. Mining ships became improvised warships. Research vessels became mobile sensor platforms. Merchant marines became auxiliary fleets. And, at the center of it all, the small human fleet that had sparked this transformation. As the determination raced toward Althean Station, Marcus reflected on what Ambassador Vasquez had told him about gratitude. She had said that humans remembered those who helped them, but Marcus was beginning to understand that the reverse was also true. The species of the Althean sector would remember that when crisis came, humanity had not calculated acceptable losses or strategic withdrawals. They had kept their promises, regardless of the cost. The battle for Althean Station would determine whether that remembered gratitude would be enough to overcome impossible odds. But, as Marcus watched the growing fleet of unlikely allies converging on the station, he felt something he hadn't expected in a fight against such overwhelming opposition. He felt hope. The determination sensor array detected the raider fleet while it was still 6 hours out from Althean Station. 53 vessels in total, including 8 capital ships that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. The raiders were broadcasting demands for unconditional surrender and threatening to destroy the station if resistance was offered. Marcus stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as friendly icons began appearing around Althean Station. The human fleet numbered only 12 ships, but they were being joined by over 40 vessels from the protected species. Not warships, but something perhaps more valuable, beings fighting for their homes and their future. "Open a channel to all vessels," Marcus ordered. "This is Commander Rivera of the United Earthship Determination. Today we face an enemy that believes fear is stronger than courage, that greed is more powerful than gratitude. They are about to learn how wrong they are." He paused, looking around his bridge at crew members who had volunteered for this mission knowing it might be their last. "To our human ships, remember that we carry with us the hopes of 8 billion people who dream of a galaxy where promises mean something. To our allies, remember that you are not fighting alone, and you will never be abandoned as long as humanity draws breath. Today we prove that some things are worth more than tactical advantage or strategic calculation." The raider fleet was accelerating toward the station, confident in their numerical superiority. They had used this same tactic dozens of times before, overwhelming defenders with superior numbers and firepower. They expected the human fleet to withdraw, as every previous protector had done when faced with impossible odds. Instead, the human fleet began moving forward to meet them, surrounded by a cloud of civilian vessels that should have been fleeing but were instead preparing to fight. It was a sight that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. The moment when gratitude became a weapon more powerful than any arsenal. The battle for Althean Station was about to begin, and, with it, the transformation of galactic civilization itself. The space around Althean Station erupted into chaos as the massive Raider fleet closed the distance to engagement range. Admiral Krexthal, commanding the Raiders from his flagship Void Render, watched his tactical display with growing confusion. According to his intelligence, the human protection force consisted of 12 lightly armed vessels. His scanners were detecting over 50 ships arranged in defensive formations around the station. Commander Veltar, Krexthal growled to his subordinate. Explain these additional contacts. The younger raider studied his sensor readings carefully. Sir, most of these vessels are civilian craft. Mining ships, research vessels, cargo haulers. They've been fitted with improvised weapon systems, but they're no match for our battle fleet. Krexthal's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. So the humans have convinced these sheep to die alongside them. How touching. It will make our victory more profitable. More slaves to sell, more ships to salvage. But, as the fleets closed to combat range, Krexthal began to realize that something was fundamentally different about this engagement. The defensive fleet wasn't arranged in standard military formations. Instead, the civilian vessels were positioned in complex, overlapping patterns that seemed to prioritize sensor coverage and communication links over firepower concentration. The first hint of what was coming occurred when his lead attack squadron moved to engage what appeared to be isolated human destroyers. The Keth mining vessels suddenly dropped their camouflaged cargo containers, revealing them to be sophisticated sensor jammers and electronic warfare pods. The attack squadron found their targeting systems scrambled and their communications disrupted just as they entered engagement range. At the same moment, the Solani research ships began broadcasting detailed real-time analysis of the Raider fleet's movements, transmitting tactical data to every vessel in the defensive formation. What had appeared to be a chaotic mix of civilian craft suddenly began moving with the precision of a seasoned military unit. Impossible, Krexthal snarled as his lead squadron was forced to withdraw under concentrated fire from what should have been harmless cargo vessels. These are not warships. His tactical officer, Commander Sarvan, was frantically updating target assessments. Sir, the Torvan merchant vessels have been retrofitted with military-grade shields and weapons. The mining ships are using their industrial equipment as weapons. Their cutting beams are slicing through our fighter screens like they're made of paper. But it was more than just improvised weapons and retrofitted civilian craft. Krexthal was witnessing something he had never seen in decades of raiding. Perfect coordination between species that had never fought together before. The Keth miners were providing electronic warfare support for Torvan engineers who were in turn sharing targeting data with Solani scientists who were coordinating with human tacticians in a seamless web of cooperation. Commander Marcus Rivera, watching the battle unfold from the Determination's bridge, felt a surge of pride as he saw the plan coming together. For the past 3 weeks, humanity's fleet had not just been protecting these systems, they had been learning from them, understanding their capabilities, and, most importantly, earning their trust. Status report. Marcus called out as the Determination engaged a raider cruiser that was attempting to break through to the station. The Keth mining group has disabled 3 raider destroyers, Lieutenant Commander Park reported. The Torvan merchant squadron is holding the southern approach. The Solani sensor network is tracking every raider movement in real time. Commander Zhang looked up from his tactical display. Sir, this is incredible. The raiders have numerical superiority, but they can't coordinate their attacks. Every time they try to concentrate force, our allies are already repositioned to counter them. Marcus nodded as he watched a squadron of raider fighters attempt to strafe Althean Station, only to find themselves caught in crossfire from 3 different defensive positions that had somehow anticipated their approach vector. It's not about the ships, Commander. It's about the trust. These species have learned to work together because they know we'll keep our promises. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome became clear within the first 2. What Admiral Krexthal had expected to be a routine, overwhelming assault had turned into a nightmare of coordination and mutual support unlike anything he had ever encountered. His ships were being systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to know their intentions before they did. The final blow came when the Determination and 3 Torvan heavy transports managed to isolate the Void Render from its escort vessels. Instead of the single human ship he expected to face, Krexthul found himself surrounded by coordinated fire from 4 different species, all working together with mathematical precision. "Admiral," Commander Sarven called out as alarm klaxons blared throughout the Void Renders Bridge. "We're being hit from 6 different vectors simultaneously. Shields are failing, and we're venting atmosphere from the port side." Krexthul stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In 30 years of raiding, he had never seen such coordination from a defensive force. How are they doing this? They're different species. They should be unable to work together effectively. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human commander." Marcus Rivera's face appeared on the main screen, calm and resolute despite the battle raging around his ship. "Admiral Krexthul, this is Commander Rivera. I'm offering you and your fleet one opportunity to surrender and withdraw from this sector." Krexthul's mandibles clicked in fury. "You think you've won, human? This fleet is only the beginning. There are larger raider confederations that will come for these systems, forces that will make my fleet look like a patrol squadron." Marcus nodded seriously. "I'm sure there are. And when they come, we'll face them together. All of us." The camera angle widened to show representatives from each of the sector's species standing on the Determinations Bridge. "You see, Admiral, you've made one fundamental miscalculation." "And what is that?" "You assumed that gratitude and loyalty were weaknesses that could be exploited. You never considered that they might be strengths that could change the nature of warfare itself." The transmission ended, and Krexthul found himself facing a choice he had never had to make before. Surrender, or watch his entire fleet be systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with capabilities he didn't understand. "Signal all vessels," he finally ordered. "We withdraw." As the raider fleet limped away from Althean Station, Marcus stood on his bridge watching the aftermath of the battle. Around the station, the mixed fleet of human and allied vessels was already organizing search and rescue operations for damaged ships and stranded crew members. Species that had been strangers 3 weeks ago were now working together as if they had been allies for generations. "Commander," Lieutenant Park called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Confederation High Command." The main screen activated to show Prime Speaker Zethkaler. Their crystalline features cycling through colors Marcus had learned indicated deep contemplation. "Commander Rivera, the Confederation Council has been monitoring the situation in the Althean sector. We must confess ourselves surprised by recent developments." "How so, Prime Speaker?" "When we assigned humanity to protect these border systems, we expected you to follow established protocols, strategic withdrawals, acceptable losses, calculated risk assessments. Instead, you have accomplished something we thought impossible." Marcus waited for the Prime Speaker to continue. "You have created a true alliance. Not a treaty of mutual convenience, but genuine cooperation between species that trust each other completely. The tactical reports from today's battle are unlike anything in our military databases. How did you accomplish this?" Marcus considered his response carefully. "With respect, Prime Speaker, we didn't do anything special. We simply kept our promises and treated our allies as partners rather than burdens. The rest followed naturally." "Naturally," Zethkaler repeated, their crystalline form shifting to a deep blue hue. "Commander, what you call natural has eluded galactic civilization for millennia. The concept of unconditional mutual support that you have demonstrated today challenges fundamental assumptions about how species relate to each other." "Perhaps those assumptions were wrong," Marcus replied. "Perhaps the galaxy has been operating on the premise that self-interest is the only reliable motivator, when in fact gratitude and loyalty might be stronger forces." Zethkaler was quiet for a long moment. "The Council would like to dispatch observers to the Althean sector. We wish to study what you have accomplished here and determine whether it can be replicated elsewhere." Marcus looked around his bridge at the mixed crew that now included representatives from each of the protected species. In 3 weeks, they had become more than just allies. They had become family. "Prime Speaker, observers are welcome, but I think you'll find that what we've accomplished here can't be studied like a scientific phenomenon. It can only be experienced. These species don't trust us because we're powerful or because we offer them advantages. They trust us because we've proven our gratitude is real." After the transmission ended, Marcus found himself standing once again at the observation port. looking out at the fleet of vessels that surrounded Althean Station. But now, instead of seeing separate species maintaining careful distances from each other, he saw something unprecedented in galactic history. A true multi-species community bound together by mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Dr. Thissa of the Solani floated up beside him in her environmental suit, her translator converting her harmonic speech into standard galactic. Commander Rivera, my people have been discussing what occurred today. We believe we witnessed more than a military victory. What do you mean, Doctor? We witnessed the birth of something new. Before today, each species in this sector existed in isolation, accepting protection from those stronger than ourselves and offering little in return. Today, we fought as equals alongside humans who could have withdrawn but chose to stand with us instead. Gorvek, the Keth mining supervisor, approached from the other side. His people's translation technology rendered his gravelly voice in clipped, precise tones. The Keth have decided something, Commander. We no longer wish to be protected species. We wish to be alliance partners. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What does that mean exactly? Engineer Prime Velas of the Torvin materialized via hologram, their three-dimensional form flickering slightly. It means, Commander Rivera, that we no longer see this as humanity protecting the Althean sector. We see this as the Althean Alliance defending our shared space. The implications of what they were suggesting hit Marcus immediately. They weren't talking about a simple military alliance or a mutual defense pact. They were talking about something that had never existed in galactic civilization. A true confederation of equals based on trust rather than power. The Confederation Council will have to approve any formal alliance, Marcus pointed out. Perhaps, Dr. Thissa replied. But what we decide here matters more than what councils approve there. Today proved that gratitude can become something greater than any individual debt. It can become a bond that transforms how species relate to each other. Over the following weeks, news of the Battle of Althean Station spread throughout Confederation space. The military reports were impressive enough. A small human fleet and their civilian allies had defeated a raider force 3 times their size through unprecedented coordination and mutual support. But it was the political implications that truly shook the galactic community. For the first time in recorded history, multiple species were voluntarily integrating their military, economic, and social structures not because of conquest or coercion, but because of trust. The Althean Alliance, as it came to be known, was offering a new model for how galactic civilization could operate. Ambassador Elena Vasquez arrived in the sector 2 months after the battle, ostensibly to conduct a formal review of humanity's performance. But Marcus suspected she had really come to see for herself what they had accomplished. When I spoke to the Confederation Council about human gratitude, she told Marcus during their private meeting aboard the Determination, I hoped that our promises might mean something to our allies. I never imagined they might transform galactic civilization. Marcus looked out at Althean Station, where Keth, Torvin, Solani, and human workers labored side by side to expand the facility into a true multi-species hub. It's not just our gratitude, Ambassador. It's theirs too. They remember that we stood with them when we could have withdrawn. That memory has changed how they see the galaxy. The Confederation Council is nervous, Elena admitted. What you've accomplished here challenges everything they thought they knew about interspecies relations. Some members are concerned about the precedent you're setting. What kind of precedent? The precedent that protection doesn't have to be a service purchased with resources or territory. The precedent that alliances can be based on genuine partnership rather than calculated advantage. The precedent that gratitude might be more valuable than any commodity they've ever traded. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, Elena, what we've built here isn't a threat to the Confederation. It's an opportunity. Imagine what galactic civilization could accomplish if every alliance was based on the kind of trust we've developed here. Elena smiled. That's exactly what terrifies them, Marcus. And exactly what gives me hope. As the Determination prepared to receive new orders from Confederation High Command, Marcus reflected on the transformation of the Althean sector. 3 months ago, these systems had been defended by reluctant protectors who calculated acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals. Now they were defended by alliance partners who trusted each other completely and fought as one. The gratitude that had brought humanity into the galactic community was becoming something larger, a force that was reshaping how species related to each other across the galaxy. And this was only the beginning. The next transmission from High Command would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove that human promises could indeed change galaxies. But Marcus was no longer worried about humanity's place among the stars. They had found their purpose, and it was greater than anything they had imagined when they first looked up at the night sky and dreamed of joining the galactic community. They were not just members of galactic civilization. They were becoming its conscience, the species that remembered every kindness and repaid every debt, the force that was proving gratitude could indeed move stars. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council convened 3 months after the Battle of Althean Station, but the tension in the Great Chamber had been building for weeks. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the human delegation section, watching as representatives from across the galaxy debated the implications of what had come to be known as the Althean phenomenon. Prime Speaker Zethkaler called the session to order, their crystalline form cycling through colors that Elena had learned indicated deep concern. Honored delegates, we gather today to address a situation unprecedented in Confederation history. The alliance formed in the Althean sector has begun spreading to other regions of space, challenging fundamental assumptions about how galactic civilization operates. On the massive holographic display at the center of the chamber, star charts showed the spread of what observers were calling alliance zones, regions where species were voluntarily integrating their societies based on the model established in Althean space. The Rigel sector had been the first to request human advisors after successfully repelling raider attacks through coordinated multi-species defense. The Proxima systems had followed, then the outer territories of the vegan Commonwealth. The question before this council, Zethkaler continued, is whether these developments represent a positive evolution of galactic civilization or a dangerous deviation from established order. General Krulex of the Vorthak military was the first to speak, his massive form imposing even in the chamber designed for multiple species. Prime Speaker, the military implications of these alliance zones are troubling. Traditional command structures are being abandoned in favor of integrated multi-species forces that operate outside established protocols. How can the Confederation maintain order if member species begin creating their own military alliances? Elena rose from her seat, requesting permission to address the council. When Zethkaler granted it, she moved to the central speaking platform with the confidence of someone who had been expecting this moment. General Krulex raises important concerns about military order, she began. But I would ask the council to consider what we mean by order. If order means rigid hierarchy and centralized control, then, yes, the alliance zones represent a deviation from established practice. But if order means peace, prosperity, and security for all member species, then these zones represent the greatest success in Confederation history. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show detailed statistics from the alliance zones. Piracy is down 85% in regions where multi-species alliances operate. Trade has increased by 300%. Most significantly, not a single member species in an alliance zone has requested to withdraw from the Confederation. The Nereid representative, floating serenely in their environmental chamber, spoke in their characteristic harmonic tones. Ambassador Vasquez speaks of success, but what of autonomy? These alliances require unprecedented levels of cooperation and shared decision-making. Are member species losing their individual identity in pursuit of collective security? Elena had anticipated this concern as well. Honored Nereid, I would argue the opposite is true. In traditional Confederation relationships, smaller species often have little choice but to accept protection on whatever terms are offered. In the alliance zones, every species contributes according to their unique capabilities and receives benefits proportional to their contribution. The Keth have become master engineers because their mining expertise was valued and developed. The Solani have expanded their research into areas they never could have afforded alone because alliance partners provided resources and security. From across the chamber, the representative of the Draconian Empire, a species known for their militant approach to galactic politics, interjected with barely concealed hostility. What you describe sounds remarkably like the formation of competing power blocks within the Confederation. Are humans attempting to create their own empire under the guise of alliances? The chamber fell silent. This was the accusation Elena had been dreading, the interpretation that could turn the alliance zones from a diplomatic triumph into a galactic crisis. Senator Vextera, Elena replied, using the Draconian's formal title. I understand your concern, but the evidence contradicts your interpretation. Humans hold no special authority in any alliance zone. Command structures rotate based on expertise and situation. Trade agreements benefit all partners equally. Most importantly, every alliance zone remains fully committed to Confederation membership and follows all Confederation laws and protocols. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who had spent centuries managing a galaxy through careful balance of power and mutual suspicion. But you raise a deeper question about what we're really building here. The alliance zones aren't about human empire or even human leadership. They're about proving that gratitude can be stronger than fear, that trust can be more valuable than dominance, that species can work together as genuine equals rather than competitors in an endless struggle for advantage. The Altarian Commercial Syndicate representative, their crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lighting in complex patterns, leaned forward in their seating area. Ambassador, your idealistic language is admirable, but what happens when these alliances face real tests? What happens when partners have conflicting interests? What happens when the cost of mutual support becomes too high? Elena smiled, remembering a conversation she had had with Commander Rivera just before leaving for this council session. Syndicate Representative HFY, those tests have already come. Just last month, the Rigel Alliance faced exactly the situation you describe. The holographic display shifted to show the Rigel sector, where the Alliance zone had faced its first major crisis when the Andromedans, the region's most powerful species, had discovered valuable rare elements on a world claimed by the Centaurians, their smallest alliance partner. Traditional galactic politics would have predicted that the Andromedans would use their superior power to claim the resources, leaving the Centaurians to accept whatever compensation was offered. Instead, the Rigel Alliance negotiated a joint development agreement where the Centaurians retained sovereignty over their world while sharing development costs and benefits with all alliance partners. Elena highlighted the economic data flowing across the display. The result? The Andromedans gained access to resources they needed while building lasting trust with their partners. The Centaurians developed their world's economy beyond anything they could have achieved alone. And every species in the alliance benefited from the precedent that partners protect each other's interests rather than exploit them. General Krullex growled, the sound translating as deep skepticism. One example does not constitute proof. Human. What happens when the stakes are higher? What happens when alliance partners must choose between their own survival and their obligations to others? Elena's expression grew serious. General, that test has also come. 3 weeks ago, the Proxima Alliance faced the largest raider assault in their history. The Helix Confederation, which had been driven out of core systems by Confederation forces, attempted to establish new bases in Proxima space using a fleet of over 200 vessels. The chamber stirred as delegates called up intelligence reports on the incident. The Helix Confederation was a notorious collection of pirate fleets and rogue military units that had been terrorizing frontier regions for decades. The assault targeted the Kepler system, Elena continued, home to the Etherians, who are pacifists with no military capability. Traditional calculations would have suggested that defending them was strategically impossible. The entire Proxima Alliance fleet numbered only 60 vessels, mostly civilian craft with minimal combat capability. She gestured to the display, which showed the tactical situation. But instead of calculating acceptable losses or strategic withdrawals, the Alliance did something unprecedented. Every species contributed everything they could. The Etherians, despite their pacifist beliefs, provided logistics support and medical facilities. The Martian colonists offered their entire merchant marine as transport vessels. The Belters retrofitted their mining platforms as mobile weapons platforms. The display showed the battle that had followed, not the kind of overwhelming assault that typically characterized fleet engagements, but a complex, coordinated defense that used every advantage the Alliance could muster. The battle lasted 18 hours, Elena said quietly. When it was over, the Helix Confederation had been not just defeated, but completely destroyed as a fighting force. More importantly, not a single Etherian civilian was harmed, and every Alliance partner who requested assistance received it, regardless of their own military contribution. Prime Speaker Zethkaler's crystalline form shifted through a spectrum of colors Elena had never seen before. Ambassador, you are describing military coordination that our experts claim should be impossible between species that have known each other for less than a year. Prime Speaker, that's exactly the point. The Alliance partners don't just know each other, they trust each other completely. They fight not because they're ordered to, but because they know their partners would do the same for them. They coordinate not because they follow the same protocols, but because they share the same commitment to each other's welfare. The vegan representative, an ancient being whose species had been part of the Confederation since its founding, spoke for the first time. Young human, what you describe challenges principles that have governed galactic civilization for millennia. If what you claim is true, if gratitude and trust can indeed replace fear and competition as the basis for interstellar relations, then everything we have built may need to be reconsidered. Elena felt the weight of history in that statement. The vegan Commonwealth had helped establish the Confederation's foundational principles. If they were questioning those principles, it meant the implications of the Alliance zones were even greater than she had realized. Honored vegan, I believe that's exactly what we're seeing. The Alliance zones aren't just new military formations or economic partnerships. They're proof that galactic civilization can evolve beyond the zero-sum thinking that has dominated interstellar relations. She turned to address the entire chamber. For generations, the Confederation has maintained peace through balance of power, ensuring that no single species or alliance becomes powerful enough to threaten others. It's been successful, but it's also limited our potential. Species compete rather than collaborate. Resources are hoarded rather than shared. Innovation stagnates because knowledge is treated as proprietary advantage rather than common benefit. The holographic display shifted to show comparative data between Alliance zones and traditional Confederation territories. The differences were stark: higher economic growth, faster technological development, lower conflict rates, and significantly higher satisfaction indices among member populations. The Alliance zones prove that there's another way, Elena continued. When species genuinely trust each other, when gratitude and mutual support replace suspicion and competition, the results exceed what any individual species could achieve alone. Senator Vexthara of the Draconian Empire rose from their seating area, their scaled form radiating hostility. Ambassador Vasquez, your words are pretty, but you speak of fundamentally changing the nature of galactic civilization. What you call evolution, others might call revolution. What guarantee do you offer that these Alliance zones will not eventually challenge Confederation authority directly? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Elena realized that this was the moment that would determine not just humanity's future in the galaxy, but the future of the Alliance zones and perhaps galactic civilization itself. Senator Vexthara, I offer the same guarantee that humans have always offered, our word, backed by our actions. But more than that, I offer proof. She activated a new section of the holographic display, showing transmission logs and diplomatic communications from across Alliance zone space. Every Alliance zone has been offered opportunities to declare independence from the Confederation. Separatist movements have approached them with promises of greater autonomy and freedom from Confederation oversight. In every case, the response has been the same: absolute loyalty to the Confederation and determination to work within established frameworks. Elena highlighted specific communications. The Rigel Alliance recently received an offer from the Outer Rim Coalition to join their independence movement. Their response was to increase their contributions to Confederation defense funds and request permission to send additional forces to patrol disputed border regions. She switched to another set of communications. The Proxima Alliance was approached by corporate interests offering exclusive trade deals if they withdrew from Confederation commerce regulations. They not only refused, but proposed new regulations to ensure that their increased prosperity was shared with non-alliance Confederation members. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates processed this information. Elena pressed her advantage. Honored delegates, the alliance zones aren't a threat to Confederation authority. They're its greatest strength. They prove that member species can trust the Confederation so completely that they're willing to trust each other. They show that gratitude and loyalty, once established, become forces for stability rather than revolution. Prime Speaker Zethkaler called for order as the discussions threatened to become chaotic. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council appreciates your presentation. However, the question remains, what does humanity propose we do with these developments? The alliance zones exist outside established frameworks, regardless of their stated loyalty to Confederation principles. Elena took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for since the day humanity first joined the Confederation. Prime Speaker, honored delegates, humanity proposes that the Confederation formally recognize and support the alliance zone model, not as an alternative to Confederation membership, but as an enhanced form of it. We propose establishing protocols for multi-species alliances that maintain Confederation oversight while allowing the kind of cooperation we've seen in Althean and Rigel space. The chamber erupted in voices speaking dozens of languages simultaneously. Elena could see some delegates nodding in consideration, while others were clearly alarmed by the suggestion. Furthermore, she continued when order was restored, we propose that humanity serve as facilitators for any species wishing to explore alliance relationships, not as leaders or rulers, but as partners who have learned something about building trust between different peoples. General Krillex's voice cut through the noise. You ask us to institutionalize what could be the end of traditional galactic order. Elena met his gaze directly. General, I ask you to institutionalize what could be the beginning of something better. The alliance zones aren't ending galactic order. They're proving that order can be based on something stronger than fear and competition. As the debate continued around her, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. 3 years ago, they had been a young species seeking admission to an ancient civilization. Now they were proposing to help transform that civilization into something unprecedented in galactic history. The outcome of this council session would determine whether gratitude could indeed change galaxies, or whether the forces of tradition and suspicion would prove too strong to overcome. But, regardless of what the council decided, Elena knew that the alliance zones had already proven something profound about the potential for cooperation in the universe. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready to embrace that potential or would choose to remain trapped in patterns of competition and mistrust that had defined interstellar relations for millennia. The next few hours would determine the answer, and, with it, the future of galactic civilization itself. 50 years had passed since Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Confederation Council and proposed institutionalizing the Alliance Zone model. Now, Admiral Sarah Chun, Elena's former aide and current head of the Alliance Facilitation Program, stood in the observation deck of the UES Harmony, watching the most remarkable sight in galactic history unfold before her. The Galactic Unity Station stretched across 300 kilometers of space, a massive structure that served as headquarters for what had become known as the Greater Confederation, a galaxy transformed by the simple principle that gratitude could be stronger than fear. The station itself was a testament to what Alliance Zone cooperation could accomplish. Built by 47 different species working together, it incorporated architectural styles and technologies from across the galaxy while maintaining perfect functionality for all member races. Admiral Chun called out Commander David Park, Sarah's chief of staff and grandson of the former communications officer from the Determination. The delegation from the Outer Rim territories has arrived. They're requesting immediate audience. Sarah nodded, her mind still processing the magnitude of what was happening. The Outer Rim territories had been the last holdout against Alliance Zone integration, a collection of fiercely independent systems that had maintained traditional Confederation relationships for 5 decades while watching the rest of the galaxy transform around them. What changed their minds? Sarah asked as they walked toward the diplomatic chambers. David consulted his datapad. The Scorpion Nebula Crisis. When the Vorthan Empire launched their invasion of Rim space, they expected to face isolated systems defending themselves individually. Instead, they encountered something they'd never seen before. Sarah remembered the reports from that conflict. The Vorthan Empire, a militaristic civilization from beyond Confederation space, had targeted the Outer Rim specifically because intelligence suggested those systems lacked the Alliance zone coordination that had made the rest of Confederation territory too costly to attack. They had been catastrophically wrong. The Rim systems fought as individual planets, David continued, but Alliance zone neighbors responded immediately. The Rigel Alliance sent their entire mobile defense fleet. The Proxima Alliance contributed their advanced early warning systems. The Altarian Commercial Syndicate redirected trade routes to support Rim economies during the crisis. Sarah shook her head in amazement. Even after 50 years, the evolution of Alliance Zone thinking continued to surprise her. They weren't Alliance partners, but they received Alliance support anyway. Exactly. And the Rim leadership finally understood that gratitude and mutual support aren't limited to formal agreements. They're principles that extend to anyone who shares your values. The diplomatic chamber they entered was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate not just the original 12 Confederation species, but the hundreds of races that had joined the Greater Confederation over the past 5 decades. Environmental systems adjusted automatically for atmospheric, gravitational, and sensory requirements, while universal translators had evolved to convey not just words but emotional nuances between species. The Outer Rim delegation was led by Chancellor Vexandra, a member of the Nexian species whose people had been among the fiercest opponents of Alliance Zone integration. Her crystalline carapace reflected the chamber's lighting in patterns that Sarah had learned to read as a mixture of determination and humility. Admiral Chun, Chancellor Vexandra began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones characteristic of her species. The Outer Rim territories formally request integration into the Alliance Zone system. Sarah inclined her head respectfully. Chancellor, the Greater Confederation welcomes your decision. However, I want to ensure you understand what Alliance Zone membership means. This isn't just a military alliance or trade agreement. It's a commitment to trust and mutual support that goes beyond traditional diplomatic relationships. Admiral, we understand. More than that, we now realize we've been living a contradiction for 50 years. We maintained our independence from Alliance zones while benefiting from their protection. We held ourselves apart from galactic transformation while depending on its stability. The Vorthan crisis proved that our isolation was an illusion. Sarah gestured to the viewing ports that looked out on the Greater Confederation's capital system. Hundreds of worlds orbited the local star, connected by transport networks and communication relays that enabled unprecedented cooperation between different species. Chancellor, when the Alliance Zone system was first proposed, many beings feared it would mean the end of individual species identity. What we've discovered instead is that working together has allowed every race to become more than they ever could have been alone. As if to illustrate her point, a massive transport ship passed by the viewing port, a vessel designed by Torvan engineers, powered by Solani energy technology, crewed by a mixed species complement, and carrying goods produced through cooperative ventures spanning dozens of worlds. The Keth have become the Galaxies' master architects, Sarah continued, not because they abandoned their mining heritage, but because Alliance Zone cooperation allowed them to apply that expertise to building rather than just extracting. The Solani have made discoveries that revolutionized science, not by working in isolation, but by sharing research with species whose different perspectives revealed new possibilities. Chancellor Vexandra's carapace patterns shifted to what Sarah recognized as deep consideration. And humanity? What has your species become in this transformed galaxy? Sarah smiled, remembering a similar question asked by Elena Vasquez decades earlier. We've become what we always hoped to be, Chancellor. We've become the species that others can count on, the ones who remember their debts and honor their commitments. But more than that, we've become facilitators of something larger than ourselves. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. The image was breathtaking. Thousands of star systems connected by trade routes, communication networks, and mutual defense agreements. Conflicts that had raged for millennia had been resolved through Alliance Zone mediation. Species that had never interacted were now working together on projects that benefited entire sectors. 50 years ago, the galaxy was held together by balance of power, everyone too afraid of everyone else to risk major conflict. Today, it's held together by something much stronger. Trust. Gratitude. The knowledge that attacking one Alliance zone means fighting all of them. David stepped forward with another display showing military statistics. Admiral, perhaps Chancellor Vexandra would be interested in the current threat assessment. Sarah nodded. Chancellor, this might surprise you. Despite having the largest and most powerful military force in galactic history, the Greater Confederation has the lowest conflict rate of any civilization on record. Alliance zones simply don't fight each other, and external threats face such overwhelming opposition that most conflicts end before they begin. The Vorthan Empire discovered this during their invasion attempt, David added. They expected to face the Outer Rim's individual defense forces. Instead, they encountered coordinated response from 43 different Alliance zones. The war lasted 6 days, and it ended not with conquest but with the Vorthan Empire requesting Alliance zone partnership for themselves. Chancellor Vexandra's patterns shifted again, this time indicating astonishment. They joined the system they attempted to destroy? Gratitude works in both directions, Sarah explained. When the Vorthans realized they had been defeated without vindictiveness, when Alliance Zone medical ships began treating their wounded and Alliance Zone engineers helped repair their damaged worlds, they experienced something their militaristic culture had never known. Mercy from strength, help from former enemies. Sarah paused, looking out at the traffic flowing around the Unity Station, ships from hundreds of worlds, carrying beings who had learned to see the galaxy not as a collection of competing territories, but as a shared home. Chancellor, what we've discovered over the past 50 years is that gratitude is literally contagious. When someone experiences genuine kindness, genuine help without strings attached, they want to share that experience with others. The Alliance zones have grown not through conquest or coercion, but through example. And the old Confederation structure? Chancellor Vexandra asked. The traditional balance of power that governed galactic politics for millennia? David activated another display showing governmental structures. It's evolved into something unprecedented, Chancellor. The Greater Confederation maintains all traditional oversight and regulatory functions, but major decisions are now made through Alliance Zone consensus rather than power block negotiations. Sarah studied the display, still amazed by what had been accomplished. Prime Speaker Zeth Kaler, who was instrumental in humanity's original admission to the Confederation, described it best. They said we had replaced democracy of the powerful with democracy of the grateful. Species vote not based on their military strength or economic leverage, but on their commitment to mutual support and shared prosperity. Which brings us to the question of your integration, Sarah continued, turning back to Chancellor Vexandra. The Outer Rim territories represent 37 star systems and 14 different species. You could form your own Alliance Zone, join an existing one, or create some hybrid arrangement. The choice is yours. Chancellor Vexandra consulted with her delegation before responding. Admiral, during the Vorthan crisis, we were aided by Alliance zones across the galaxy despite having maintained our separation for 50 years. We wish to join not just any Alliance zone, but all of them. We request integration into the Greater Confederation as a whole, with our commitments and obligations extending to every member species. Sarah felt a surge of emotion at the request. It was unprecedented, a direct pledge of loyalty not to regional partners, but to galactic civilization itself. Chancellor, what you're proposing has never been attempted. It would mean that your systems would be responsible for supporting Alliance Zone operations anywhere in the galaxy, while simultaneously receiving support from all Alliance Zones when needed. Admiral, the Vorthan crisis taught us something crucial. Gratitude cannot be limited by geography or formal agreements. If Alliance Zones can respond to threats against non-members, then membership should reflect that universal commitment. David was frantically consulting databases and precedents. Admiral, there's no existing framework for this kind of galaxy-wide Alliance Zone membership. Sarah looked out at the Unity Station, thinking about the journey that had brought galactic civilization to this moment. 50 years ago, humans had been a young species making grand promises about gratitude and loyalty. Now those promises had transformed the galaxy into something no one had imagined possible. Then, we'll create one, she decided. The Greater Confederation has always evolved to meet new challenges. If the Outer Rim territories want to pledge themselves to the galactic community as a whole, we'll find a way to make that work. As the